Tonight we've got an old brown case, painted black on the edge, that reads Gibson. What's in here? It's something quite special. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. A beautiful golden finish with awesome top carve, humbucker pickups, wood grain that looks suspiciously familiar to Terry, the 1952 Gold Top, but this one has a serial number starting 7. Is this a 1957 Gold Top that we're documenting tonight? No, it's another one of Jim's conversions. This used to be a 1952 Gibson Les Paul, but Jim does more than just burst conversions like we documented in this episode. This time it's been converted into the 57 specs and remains a Gold Top. So let's go ahead and learn about the conversion process. Jim got this one first as a stripped husk that somebody was trying to make a project out of and they ran out of time. But look at the original wood of this one. It's a 3-piece top, but that left side has so much flame figuring. This would be a perfect candidate to do a whole bunch of arm wear right here to reveal a flame top, because it's still under there. He did not change the top on this one. But first things first, the neck angle is never right on these things, so he does the neck reset process, which also requires a refret, because you have to remove these specific frets to release the neck join. And you have to make sure you get the exact right parts, and you really have to know what you're doing at this point. But now with the neck safely removed, Jim can put a shim in and do a little bit of sanding to the top to get us to that proper 4-degree neck angle pitch. With that all sorted, we need to route it out for humbuckers, but you just don't take a router and go crazy. He actually fills in the cavities first, making it look something like this. But you might notice, hey, we don't have a bridge and tailpiece on here. Remember, these originally ship with the trapeze style tailpieces, and those don't have any routes in the top, so that gives you a clean slate to do whatever you want. So after taking a bunch of precise measurements and lining everything up, it's go time to make permanent modifications to get us ready for that ABR1 bridge and stop bar tailpiece setup. And then of course it's very important to double check your work, so Jim then strings it all up to make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. And now we can route it out for the humbuckers. So here's the reason why you actually have to fill that in and you can't just enlarge a route, because look, a P90 ends up being right here, so your spacing needs to completely change. We'll have to look for that when we tear this guitar apart. But this is such a cool shot, seeing it where it is. But after all that work, here's what we're left with. But different from last time, Jim didn't actually do the refinishing work on this one, because he says the gold finish, it just messes up his entire setup. He likes spraying the bursts and that's it. So he sends this out to his friend over at Star Guitars to do the aging and gold top on this particular one. And I would say it turned out quite phenomenal. I was impressed when I first saw this one. It's got finish checking, some nicks and dings. Some areas look and feel a little bit more intentionally relic than others, but as far as a pre-beat up guitar goes, it's actually pretty convincing. And after that process, Jim refrets it, and now it's ready for sale. Now, to be completely fair, that is just a brief summary of what has happened here. So feel free to pause and take a closer look at all these photos that he did throughout the entire process of converting this guitar, because documentation is key when you're working with 50s era, making these awesome players conversions. I don't really follow the market for 57 gold tops, but I believe they're $150K, so you can get something like this somewhere between 30 and 50-ish. I have to be vague on that because he's actually selling this in 2 different versions, and that was the other reason why I wanted to document this guitar, because of the very special pickups that he has in here. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on my workbench, tear it apart, and take a look at all the parts and specs that he put on it. Now it's time to learn the real reason why I wanted to review this guitar, because generally speaking, refinished gold top into a gold top again doesn't excite me personally, but I'm not the biggest gold top guy. However, the pickups he sourced for these are really cool. So at first, when you take them out, you might just be like, oh, it's some sort of a boutique thing that's not branded. That's not all that exciting. It's just kind of confusing. We don't even know what they are. No, this is one of the very first sets of PAFs ever made. He said about a decade ago he pulled these out of an ES-175. This is a no sticker PAF. So that little decal that we all know and love today that says patent applied for it did not exist on the earliest PAFs. But you still have things like the L tooling marks and all the other good things you'll look for on original PAFs. But the other thing that makes them unique is they use steel screws, the silver colored ones rather than brass. So today we're going to get to hear a set of original PAFs. That's cool to me. I'm sure these are worth quite a bit of money on their own, but within the circuit they read 7.37 on the bridge, 8.15, wow, that one's a hot neck. And 3.87 in the middle. As far as our neck pickup cavity, you can tell it started life as a P90 because it's happy to see ya. You can just barely make out the screw holes for the initial height adjustments of the P90s that make the eyes in our smiley face for our long neck tenon. But here's a look at the rest of the route. You can't even tell anything's really been done. Same is true for our bridge pickup cavity. It hasn't even finished throughout. I wish refinishers would put a mark on the guitar or something, just like a little signature down here, because in the hypothetical scenario where somebody buys this and they die 5 years later and didn't put any notes in the case, I could see this guitar being mistakenly sold as a legitimate 1957 once that new finish smell wears off. But if you're interested in this guitar, you can check it out on his website, but he's selling it in 2 different ways. The way we're seeing it today is the high dollar one. Here's a spec sheet rundown of all the original parts. So that's when you get the real 57 PAFs, 50s tuners, 50s truss rod cover, 50s poker chip and switch tip. We'll later see real 57 pot codes, because that was taken from the exact same 57 175 as the pickups, and real 50s bridge and tailpiece. But if you could care less about vintage parts, you can save yourself $16,000 by having some repro parts. So this can be made to order if it happens to tickle your fancy. But now let's talk about the bridge and tailpiece. So I already told you it's real 50s vintage, post-mounted ABR1. However, he's telling me when he does an ABR1 conversion, he offsets this ever so slightly. That way the bridge stays on super tight. That way if you're working on the guitar, it doesn't fall off. It's so tight, he told me, here, take this StewMac tool. You're gonna need it. And need it I did to get this off. But this is a real 50s ABR1. This is a non-wire retainer one, so we'll have to be careful when turning it upside down here to view the markings. But sure enough, it's got what it's supposed to have there on the edge. But just look how secure that bridge is. Usually ABR1s aren't like that. It's almost acting as a locking bridge. Now our tailpiece is like the first conversion that we ever looked at from his, where it was actually a wrap tailpiece originally that has been converted by filling in the intonation set screws. And then you can use this just as a normal one. Here's our casting mark on the back. Here's a look at our pick guard. Not too much going on here, but I do believe these are real 50s knobs on here. They look quite nice. And it's 2 volumes, 2 tones like usual. And we can take a second to appreciate the new finish work in a different lighting situation. You can tell they roughed up the edge a little bit right here too to break that down. We'll actually see some areas like that over on the neck as well, just to give it the illusion that it's been like this for a while. Nice top carve. Now we can move on from our 3-piece maple top and mahogany body to end up over here with what I believe is our original Brazilian rosewood fretboard from the 52 with the original mahogany neck. We've got a mammoth nut on it, and it was refretted with Jescar 55095 fret wire. These don't seem to be quite as wide as some of the other conversions that we've looked at, but they've got some nice height to them. And you can see they've really rolled the edge of the fretboard, so that's going to be comfy to play. But on the fretboard, you can see some evidence of long fingernail players from its original life, where they wore down the Brazilian rosewood a little bit. But it has a 12-inch fretboard radius and 24 3/4-inch scale. And our nut measure is 1.66 inches, increasing to 2.076 by the 12, 0.87 first fret neck depth to 0.98 by the 12. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. This one almost seems to retain that very soft V. Like, it's not even quite V. It feels way more pronounced in the hand than it looks here. I do feel the slight more bump even up here. This one doesn't quite get that full C roundedness. Moving on to the face of the headstock. Here we can see the current status of the truss rod. Remember, all that's original. And this is a 50s vintage truss rod cover. You can see the roller marks looking at it in the right light. But we've got that characteristically low Gibson logo in Les Paul model silkscreen. I would imagine that would have to be new unless they just left the headstock alone. Which honestly, that might be a possibility. Because this aging looks a little bit more natural to me. We'll definitely have to blacklight this guitar. That'll tell us for sure. Now we can move on to the back. This is scary good. I don't think I would even realize this was a refinish. The top, it's good, right? But the back is just miles even better in my opinion. It's got wear that makes it look like, yeah, it was heavily played by somebody. They even wore down this corner over here. And most importantly, you can still see the wood grain. I think that's what sells this one. And I've seen a handful of early 52, 53s now to know to look for this kind of wood formation. It's kind of scary. I can almost see a skull in that, like 2 eyes and its nose. And then this is like his bulbous head, cheekbones. It's interesting, especially as it color shifts. But if somebody booked a private help session on my website and said, hey, can you tell me if this is a real 57 or a fake? Well, first off, even if we do have real 57 pots in here, it's really easy to tell that these joins are not that old. All the solder work looks very recent. So that would at least be a red flag to look closer or to know it's been restored at one point. Something that tells you it was an early gold top conversion is that little route right there. That's where the trapeze tailpiece ground wire used to run through. And they would end down here at that big circle that you can see that was filled in. And then that grounds off our tailpiece. The other two filled in holes are for the screws. So if you ever see something that's trying to be advertised as a big $57 and you see that at the bottom, no. And don't fall for the whole, oh, somebody put a Bigsby on it at one point and repaired it. Bigsby holes would look different. But other than that, we don't have a lot to go off of. So if somebody just had to make a quick judgment call and happened to miss looking down there, as I said, this one kind of scares me, especially since we have a 57 serial on it. As far as knowing that these are 57 pots, well, first you can look at the top for the Central Lab branding in USA. I didn't see Central Lab anywhere because it's all covered over, but you can see the USA right here. But then you have to look on the side of the pot. So it's going to say 134, also standing for Central Lab. The 7 tells you 1957, and then the last two tell you the week. So it looks like the first week of 57. So don't just look at pots and go, oh yeah, matches serial number, it's the real deal. Make sure you check the other things. And I wouldn't even consider myself a vintage expert. I'm sure there's other things you could look for, outside of the blacklight test. That would also be another thing that could help us here. But when you're dealing with a complete refinish, it's not always foolproof. But we don't have any blocks of wood being added to this conversion or anything. I don't consider myself an expert in 50s Gibson just because I've handled a few of them, but I do like having this additional little knowledge that I can share here thanks to Jim. Because sadly, I just can't afford this many vintage originals in order to gain the knowledge that I needed. A lot of the guys who are considered burst experts, etc. now, were buying them back before they were so ridiculously expensive. Which kind of makes me fear the vintage market in general in the future. What happens when the experts aren't there anymore? We need more people to carry the torch. But I guess that's what the vintage shops are for. I'm sure they train their guys. Because that's the thing about true 50s vintage. This is a conversion that we're talking about today. I'm not talking about luthier replica builds where they're really trying to make it look 100% perfect like a burst. Those types of things, they might not have any tells. You just have to have seen enough of them to know. But before I get this put back together, we might as well take a look at our 50s brown backplate too, as well as our 50s vintage output jack plate and our regular strap buttons that are also 50s. Here's the other way you would know. There's no glow to this finish at all, but to be fair, this was literally just refinished a couple of months ago. So give this thing, 10, 20 years, then it will have a glow. So again, at that point, you're looking for the type of glow. Does it match other 50s gold tops? There's so many different variations. I don't want anybody to think, oh, a blacklight test is going to instantly tell me if a guitar has been refinished. It's best for spot touch-ups and repairs to see if it's even in that aspect. But as far as answering the question, does the headstock still have the original finish? According to the blacklight test, I do not believe so. So it's not like that other conversion where they left things alone. They did a full restoration here. But all said and done, our 52 into 57 conversion is 8 pounds, 8.8 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how these early PAFs sound. That middle position is just magic. There we go, our 52 into 57 conversion with real deal PAFs from 1957, the non-stickered version. What are my final thoughts on this one? I still think I preferred the original one that we had documented. That was a 53 to a 59, but this one is very close behind. Those PAFs sound fantastic. I just wish I was a better player because there's a lot of great tones that you can get out of these. And it's not just because they're PAFs. You can hear that open vintage tone to them. It just makes you want to keep playing. There really is something to converting a Les Paul standard into it. They just all have a certain feel to them. Nothing against the junior conversion. That was a good guitar too, but it had, completely different pickups. But based on the 3 conversions that we've documented now, I definitely preferred the ones that started life as a Les Paul standard. So if you're seeing this and you want to own this, you can find it for sale at Jam City Guitars. Jim can hook you up. You can find him on Gbase or his website. I'll have some links in the description. I'm not part of this sale. I just borrowed it because I thought it was a cool guitar that you guys might like to see. But all right, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.